Ask any professional athlete how their journey started, and the response will invariably be the same. It started out with innocent fun playing sport as a youngster, and that enjoyment eventually crystallised into a far-fetched dream. The dream of one day playing that chosen sport for a living. Many of us have that dream, however fleeting, but few of us turn that dream into reality. Aussie triathlete Chris McCormack is one of those few. A youngster who briefly turned his back on the sport he loved to take the safer trail before ultimately following his heart and chasing his dreams. But not even he could realise just how far those dreams would carry him. Macca's story, an Aussies Abroad special, starts now.
I grew up on the beaches of Cronulla, and the surf club scene in the 80s was really happening. You had the Guy Leaches, the Uncle Toby Super Series, and I was really inspired by that type of racing. And triathlon in the country really boomed out of those surf clubs. I always used to ride to school. I love swimming, and I fancied myself as a bit of a runner, so I dived in head first when I was 16 years of age, and fell in love with it. There was no chance I ever thought I was ever going to make a living out of triathlon. It was, back then the sport was very, very new. It was more of a challenge than anything. It was actually laughed upon by most people. It was like, oh, we'll swim, bike and run, and we'll go for a couple of beers after it. And my parents were very, very much education first. I had all these visions as a kid of being a professional surfer, and my father used to call me an absolute dreamer. He'd be like, son, schoolwork first. You play on the weekends, soccer, football, surfing, but get the schoolwork done. The whole time my father was very, very adamant that professional athletes is not an occupation he wanted his kids to be in. I did the Junior World Championships in 1992. I finished fourth, and it was my first time in Europe, and it was great. I raced, I saw all these events, and I went and did a few events, throughout France, and I went, this is pretty cool, and I deferred university, and my father exploded on the other end of the phone, but it was pre-mobile phones back then, so I was on the payphone in France going, Dad, I'm not coming home, I'm going to stay over here and race a bit. And when I got home, I wore it pretty hard. He was like, there is no more of this racing, you finish school. So I finished college in 1995, and I sort of dropped out of the sport to really focus on my studies, and took a job at Bankers Trust in Sydney, and was on my merry way of being an accountant. My parents were over the moon, absolutely ecstatic with my decision, and I was absolutely miserable. And at the time, triathlon was really mushrooming in Australia as a sport. I really wanted to get back into it, but I was a bit apprehensive about telling my father I wouldn't mind heading down this path of maybe giving this triathlon thing a go. I had a bit of talent, I was pretty good at it, and why not chase your dreams? And one day I decided to go in and see my boss, and I quit on the spot, and he asked me why, and this was '96, and my boss laughed at me. He said, kid, you're a dreamer. Who do you think you are? Opportunities like this at Bankers Trust don't come around every day, and I think this will be a decision you regret. And I just walked, and it took me 2 weeks to tell my father that I'd quit my job. He used to pick me up on his way to work, so I'd dress in my suit, and he'd pick me up, he'd drop me at the train station, we'd sort of have a coffee on our way to work, and then he'd drop me off, he'd head on his merry way, and I'd run back home, get changed, train all day, then get dressed back in my suit for him to pick me up on his way home from work, and he'd ask me how my day was at work, and I'd tell him, and after a couple of weeks of that, I finally plucked up the courage to say, hey Mum, Dad, I quit my job, I've sold everything I own, I'm heading off to Europe.
Wow. Did you regret it at any point? Even early in the stage, do you think, oh gee, did I make the right decision here, or was it pretty much all systems go from there?
I just wanted to travel, and I figured, why not take a bike? I'll travel around the world and just try and see if I could. My aim was to stay away from home as long as possible. So I bought an open-ended ticket and landed in France, and it was, I look back now and I think, wow, I can't believe I didn't speak a word of French, and I didn't know where I was going, I didn't know any racing, and I just landed in Paris and bought a magazine at the news agency there and went to the back of it, looked for a race. Oh, there's one in Avignon, and I got on a train. Always caught the slow trains, the night trains, because that saved me a night's accommodation. I had 2,800 Australian dollars with just a dream and a hope I didn't have to go home, and I really wanted to prove to my parents that it was a good decision, and I was young, and I wanted to travel and have some fun, and this was a good way of doing it. Started winning races and was picked up by a team there. I think Australians as a whole, you know, we have to travel so far to do our sports, and when you do that, it's not easy to run back home to mum and dad when things aren't going well. And that was, you know, there was times there in France I was homesick, I was, you know, alone and hated it, like absolutely was miserable. You can't, you know, you've spent all your money to get there. You can't just run back and hope mum's going to cook you dinner tonight. She's, you know, 15,000 miles away. So, you know, it really toughens you up, hardens you up. And I think those early years in Europe, you know, cutting my teeth in these events, living out of my suitcase and doing runners on hotels because I couldn't afford to pay the room, and you know, they really hardened me up.
How far into your journey did you feel like you belonged?
It took me a while to break in, I must admit, but I started winning races, and when you start winning races, people start to take you very seriously. But I was very different to the other guys in the sense that I like to have a beer, and I like to get out a bit, because I was on the circuit for a different reason at that point in my career. I was there to have fun and see the world, and you know, winning races just sort of happened, and I was after about 18 months I started moving right up the world rankings to #1 in the world. It just happened so fast that, you know, I look back now and think, wow, you know, I can see why people saw me as different or awkward, because we're racing on Sunday, I'm on the beers with friends on a Friday night just going, how cool is Paris? You know what I mean? It was just, yeah, it was just an adventure in those early days.
When you made it to #1, were your parents convinced?
Well,
At what point did they buy in?
I think, you know, I came back in '96. I won the Australian Championships and started making a pretty healthy living. And Mum was very, very happy. Dad was still, you know, this can't last forever, son. What are you going to do post-career? And the World Championships in 1997 were held in Perth, and triathlon was the first medal at the Sydney Olympics. So that whole hype was really, you know, happening at home. And Mum and Dad came to these World Championships, and I managed to win my first World Championships in front of them. And I got a big paycheck, and they saw that, you know, 70,000 people watching this event, and then the big lead up into the Sydney Olympics, and suddenly Dad became a believer. You know, it was full speed ahead to the Olympic Games, and I was, you know, red hot shot at a gold medal at the Games, and you know, suddenly I had sponsors, and I couldn't believe companies wanted to give me money to do what I love to do, and it was, yeah, I was really in a good place.
Ahead on Aussies Abroad, just as Chris McCormack's life seems to be perfect, fate brings it crashing back to earth.
My brother got on the phone and said, hey, you need to get home, you need to get home right now. I was about to head to Europe, and I got on this plane. It was the worst 10 hours of my life because of my brother's fear in his voice was, yeah, I'll never forget that call.
Chris McCormack's decision to walk away from a safe and comfortable 9-to-5 finance career appears to have paid off in spades. In 1997, just his second year of full-time competition, Macca, as he's known throughout the triathlon world, becomes the first man in history to win the World Championship, the World Cup Series, and be ranked #1 in the same season, a position he'll make his own for 26 straight months. He is, without question, the poster boy for the sport's new generation, as it prepares to go truly global with its Olympic debut at the 2000 Sydney Games. With that milestone now just 17 months away, Macca is ideally placed to make more history as the sport's first ever Olympic gold medalist. All that stands between Chris and his burning ambition of an Olympic berth are 3 qualifier races, commencing in Japan in April 1999.
Mum was diagnosed with breast cancer, and I was like, wow. I'd just gone off to Japan, and she'd had a hiccup a couple of years before with a cancer scare, but it sort of died down. So I was apprehensive when I heard the news, but I wasn't frightened. So I went across to Japan and did these 2 selection races for the Olympic squad, and I won both of those. And when I was at the second event, I rang home to tell Mum I'd won, and my brother got on the phone and said, hey, you need to get home, you need to get home right now. I was about to head to Europe, and I got on this plane. It was the worst 10 hours of my life because of my brother's fear in his voice was, yeah, I'll never forget that call. And I landed, and I had 4 days with my mother before she passed away, and that was, you know, just demoralising, you know, for our entire family. It was just a brick wall. It was so unexpected. She was very young, and yeah, I started questioning what I was doing with my life at that point, really. I'd been away so much and I'd been so selfish, I guess, you know, travelling and chasing my athletic endeavours, and I had neglected being home. And, you know, you tend to reflect at those periods, and I really had a rough, cloudy 12 months.
Teresa McCormack passes away on April 26, 1999, just 3 days before Chris is scheduled to compete in the final Olympic qualifier, which he withdraws from to grieve with his shattered family.
I'd promised Mum on a deathbed that I'd be the best I could be. She said to me that she was proud of the decisions I'd made in my life and that I should chase my dreams. And I said, I promise you, Mum, I will, and I'm going to win that Hawaiian Ironman, and I'm going to win the Olympics. And it was a moment in my life that was a really key turning point in the human being I've become.
The night before his mother's passing, he meets a young lady named Emma Jane, who, unbeknownst to Chris at the time, will play a critical role in him piecing his life back together.
I got overlooked for the Olympic team, which was just another demoralising moment. Even though I was #1 in the world, I got overlooked.
We went down to the hotel lobby and he found out that way. So with everyone else sort of standing around, and devastated was probably not even a word to describe how he felt. He went really quiet.
Macca's famous will to win has waned, and who knows if it will ever return. 7 months later, at the end of 1999, Chris McCormack is effectively semi-retired from triathlon. His competitive fire extinguished by the emotional upheaval of watching his family fall apart and the guilt of him not being there when they needed him most.
I don't know what to do. I'm off the Olympics. I'm a failure. I can't even honour my mother.
He was moping around the house and wasn't really motivated to do anything, and I said, come on, you know, like, this is not what your mum would want. Let's move forward.
It was like one incredible woman left my life and another incredible woman came into it, and she sat me down and said, geez, you know, you've always been so energetic and open. Why don't you just go over to America? You've talked about all these races you wanted to do, and you've been caught on this World Cup circuit, and why don't you go and do all these races you've talked about winning in the States? I had a few contracts left with some sponsors, and they had 12 months on them, so we had some money coming in, and I said, why not? We'll give it one more year, and if they run away at the end of it, then I'll go back to accounting. And so we went to the States, and I dominated. For 3 years I didn't lose a race, 37 races from 37 starts. I got on this rampage of winning, and I rediscovered myself.
Once he sort of got in the momentum of racing and winning again, the passion came back.
I fell in love with triathlon again, and that's when I really made my commitment. I said, you know what, let's forget the Olympics. It was a disappointment, a setback. Let's go after this Hawaii title. I promised my mother I'd win it. I promised myself I'd win it. I was inspired by this race, and let's come here and dominate.
Macca's inner fire has returned. His Olympic disappointment harnessed as a chip on his shoulder. He creates a fiercely competitive public persona, developing a mental game that he believes can give him an edge come race day, either through him intimidating fellow competitors or them outright despising him. Despite being the most dominant short course triathlete in the world, Chris refuses to rejoin the Olympic program of training camps and qualifying races. He now wants to take control of his own destiny, so instead switches his focus to the brutal world of Ironman triathlon. And there's one race which stands above all others, the one he promised his mother he would win for her, Hawaii.
I came in 2002 and I came in pretty cocky. If you see the coverage, I cringe now when I look back. Why did you come in? This is the toughest race on the planet. You came in saying, you know, you were going to dominate here. Well, I hadn't lost a race in 3 years. You know, why would I lose this one? I still swim, bike and run. And I was bitterly humbled by this island. I had a 13-minute lead off the bike. My father was standing on Ali'i Drive, about mile marker 4, and I high-fived him, said, bank the check, Dad, I'll be back in a few hours for a beer. And 5 miles later I was walking, 2 miles later I was out of the race. It just levelled me, and I had to eat humble pie. And then I came back again the next year. I had an amazing season, and same thing happened again. I came back again the next year, And the same thing happened again, and I was like, wow, this race needs a lot more respect. I need to give it the respect it deserves.
Ahead on Aussies Abroad, a new dream has materialised for Macca to chase down. But is the World Ironman title realistic for a short course specialist?
People are starting to lose faith. You know, I was this guy winning everything but failing here, and people are starting to label me as the best guy to never win this title. I was going to be the best athlete to never win in Kona.
Aussie triathlete Chris McCormack has rebounded from the disappointment of missing the 2000 Olympic team to dominate short course racing. But he has seemingly met his match in the form of Hawaii's Big Island. Macca repeatedly crashing and burning in his early years at Kona.
Did your early experiences at Hawaii and the suffering you went through and the humiliation you went through, did it make you want it more?
Oh, 100%. Yeah, I wore some serious humble pie on this island. I came in every year touting I'm going to win this thing, and for 3 years, for 2 of the 3 years, my first 3 years, I didn't even finish it. So it was, my wife labelled them the October Blues because they were just, I was hard to be around. But now I look back at my career and those early days, and I'm glad that happened because it softened me and it made me respect this title, and it made me want it more, and it made me appreciate it when I finally started getting the balance right and the mix right and started heading in the right direction. I finally did that in 05 with a 6th place finish here. And went, okay, we're starting to work my puzzle out. Because getting this race right is about your own personal puzzle. And you know, some people can put that puzzle together very quickly, and others take a little bit more time. But once you start to get that picture looking good, you know, you're heading in the right direction. It starts to move positively for you. Dealing with heat and humidity was something I had to learn how to do. Trying to work out how to hydrate properly for myself, how to race this event, how to hold my fuel for an 8-hour race, and I'd learned that I had to keep my heart rate low being a bigger guy because I lose so much fluid sweating. And the minute I pop over 152 beats a minute, I'm on diminishing returns. So no matter how much fluid I take in, I'm losing more than my body can absorb. Yeah, I redefined the athlete I was. I was always known as a very aggressive swim biker. I really dominated triathlon with that combination. Aggressive swim, aggressive bike, and hang on in the run. That was probably my Achilles heel for this race because I kept collapsing, and so I had to change that. I had to become a runner. And I was a runner at school, but I had lost faith in my ability to run. I was scared to get off the bike with guys who I knew were very, very fast runners. I started getting my run to be very, very strong. I came back in 06 and I was running for the title. I'd given Norman Stadler a bit of a start. I got off the bike with the group, with the best runners in the game, and went after Stadler, and I just missed him by 70 seconds. And posted the fastest marathon on the new course. I was in the medical tent, absolutely gone. My youngest daughter, Sienna, was 5 weeks old. I had a 3-year-old in Talia, my oldest, and I was absolutely comatose. That race flattened me, and my father looked over me that day and said, "Son, what are you chasing? I'm proud of you. You don't need this in your life. This is too hard. You've got 2 beautiful children. Walk away from this game. You know, it's just too hard." And I said, "Dad, I want one more round," and that was 07. The light switch went on. I said, "Back your run now, kid. You can do this. You can win this on the run." And in 07, when I arrived here, you know, I was keyed up and ready to rock and roll.
And what was it like, 07?
Nerve-wracking, because it was now my 5th year here. I hadn't delivered. You know, people are starting to lose faith. You know, I was this guy winning everything but failing here. People are starting to label me as the best guy to never win this title. I was going to be the best athlete to never win in Kona, and you know, sponsors started to question, and they're like, "Oh, I think Macca can't. If he doesn't do it this year, he's never going to do it. I don't think he can do it."
You talk about others losing faith in you. Even your dad saying, "For God's sake, son, I love you. What are you doing to yourself?"
Yeah.
Did you ever lose faith in yourself? Did you ever at any point think, maybe I am chasing this ridiculous dream and I'm doing damage to myself and I have got other people and I'm being selfish and it's all about... Did you ever waver in your belief?
Lots of times. And your self-doubt yourself fears, you start to question whether you're capable of things, because you're only human, and you know, you try and surround yourself with people who believe that you can, but sometimes you see in their face that maybe they don't believe anymore, and you start to lose. Yeah, a lot of the times I lost belief, but I love the sport, you know, and I love the competition, and that's always the bait that keeps bringing me back. I remember waking up race morning and going, this is it. If I fail this time, everyone's turning their back on me. They're going to go with the new champions. And it was very, very nerve-wracking. I don't remember that the 3 or 4 days leading into the race. You just go in robotic mode, I guess, and I was really internalised. I just knew I had to put it together.
Come on! Ryan, that's enough! Go! No! No!
I was really keying off for that first 4 hours, keeping my heart rate as low as possible, and my confidence started to grow. And but then I looked at the group I was with. I had Tim DeBoom, who's a 2-time champion of the race, an amazing runner. Craig Alexander, who is probably one of the best runners, in Ironman runners in heat that there's ever been. If you turn the humidity and the heat up, Craig Alexander's probably the best runner the sport's ever seen. He's sitting in this group, and I started to panic a bit. I started to go, oh man, I hope I've made the right decision here. You know, when you've been at one beast your whole life, a swim biker, and now you're backing your run against runners that you've actually respected your whole life, and you're rolling that dice, it's nerve-wracking. And I decided about 20 miles to go on the bike that when we came into transition area for the marathon, I was going to run out of that transition for the title. It was going to be absolutely suicidal pace, and if these guys wanted to win it, they're going to have to come with me. And we did. We were running 5:25 miles, which everybody on the side of the course was like, this is too fast, slow it down. Craig took the bait, and so did DeBoom, and they both came after me, and we stayed 15 seconds apart for the first 5 miles. If it got into a slugfest, I thought I could outguts these guys, really, and it'd take the edge off their finesse. We got up over Palani Hill, about 11 miles into the course, and it started to get really, really hot and really, really ugly, and we were all in the hurt box, and then the gaps started to slowly open up. And I think mentally for those guys it would have been tough, because here's a guy that in heat and humidity collapses. I'm too big. I've been told, everyone knows I can't run in heat and humidity, that they should have run over the top of me in 11 miles, and they were losing time to me. So I think that started to plague, and they started to give up some time, and that was when I pounced. I said, this is going to be the most horrific hour and a half of your life, but close your eyes and get home, and let's put this one in the bank. And I was 6K from home, and I got that split, and I remember thinking, you've won it, just don't fall apart. And I started planning my victory speech, you know, all the people I was going to thank, and how wonderful this was. And then I started tripping over my feet. Your body starts shutting down. I'm like, oh, don't get ahead of yourself here. Let's get across that finish line first. And I was so in the moment, I forgot to take the sponges out of my finish shot. So I waited my whole life to win this race, and my finish photo was terrible because I was so embraced in the moment. I was so elated. I'd suffered and endured, and this island had humbled me, and I'd finally won the race for my mother. Finally won the race for my best mate that, you know, Sean. We grew up watching this thing. I finally ran this race for myself and the people who had backed me, and I did it in style.
Was it everything you dreamt it'd be?
Oh, it was more, I think, because, you know, the journey was so long, you know, and those hiccups in those early years. Had I come in that first year and won, that cocky kid, he doesn't deserve to be the Ironman world champion. That kid doesn't, the guy that won in 07 deserved to be the champion, because I respected the title for what it was, and it was those humbling humiliations in those early years that gave me that respect, and it was unbelievable. I remember breaking down. I used to watch the people on the videos years ago and think, oh man, what's this guy crying for, you know? And I was that guy. I was unbelievable, yeah, awesome.
Next on Aussies Abroad, Chris McCormack, with his lifelong dream finally realised, what now for Macca?
Did have issues with what now? I think I had issues with my identity at that point, because people were closing the book on you. So you start retiring yourself, I guess, and you sort of feel a little bit lost for a while.
Aussie Chris McCormack has just honoured a commitment he made to his dying mother by winning the legendary Hawaiian Ironman after years of repeated failure. At 34 years of age, he's now a world champion in both short course triathlon and Ironman. The chip on his shoulder that has been relentlessly driving him since missing the 2000 Olympics can finally be cast aside. But for a man who thrives on proving his critics wrong, where to now?
I thought, oh, I'm happy now. Like, what am I chasing now? I don't need to chase anymore. And sometimes you want to flick that off button, because that whole motion of chase, 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 next goal, can drive you insane sometimes. And, you know, after 07, I think it was, okay, what's going to motivate me now? What do I need to prove? I don't need to prove to anybody anymore. I did have issues with what now? I think I had issues with my identity at that point, because everyone was like, oh, you know, you're getting all the accolades, but people were closing the book on you. He's done it. He's, you know, let's shelve him. Who's the next one? And so you start retiring yourself, I guess, mentally. You're like, okay, yeah, cool. What do I do now? And you sort of feel a little bit lost for a while, and you try and set yourself other goals. So ultimately, your mind just switches in. Okay, defend, because it's all you've ever known. Race, defend, you know. And I think in 08, I really overcommitted myself to racing. I took some endorsement deals that maybe I shouldn't have, with some equipment that was very, very light, and it faltered in 08, and mechanical put me out of the race, and at 40 miles into the bike ride. And so I spent the whole race in the mechanic's car coming back because they were following the leaders, and I missed it. I'm watching a race that I'd won the year before unfold before my eyes, and I lost it. Like the title was gone. All the accolades I got all year, all the back padding, all the magazine covers, all the people telling me how wonderful I was, it's finished. And I watched Crowie win. And I won't lie, it was tough. And it wasn't Crowie personally. It was tough going, this was mine, it's now yours. I'm very, very happy for the new champion, because he's a wonderful guy. But disappointed that I lost the title that way. I never got to defend. So I decided in 09, I drove that motivation, I'm coming back. Me and Crowie came to loggerheads because he now owned it, I wanted it back, and we were good, very, very close friends. And yeah, when you both want something very, very badly, it can start to clash a little bit. And 09 was a showdown. I made it pretty clear that I'm coming back to get my title, and Crowie's just borrowing it. I talked the big game. I said, I'm going to win, I'm going to get my title back. I really set myself a difficult task by having probably my career worst swim. I came out 3.5 minutes behind the new champion, Craig, and I thought, oh, what have you done? And so I really had to hit the afterburners on this bike to get across to a group. And when you've given 3.5 minutes up to the best guys in the world, when you used to be a swimmer, it plagues you mentally again. You're like, oh, far out, you lost it last year. And now what have you done? You've blown it. And I had to compose myself. I really pushed hard on the bike. I closed the gap to the leaders by about 120 kilometres. And it took the sting out of my legs. I sat there for a while, focused on nutrition. I took off, and I was able to gap the group, put a few minutes into them, and set up a bit of a margin of error. You don't want to get off the bike with Craig Alexander. And I thought 3.5 minutes is going to win this race. I got off and thought, showtime. And I ran out of transition, felt wonderful. And I had this inkling feeling that I'd neglected my nutrition. I skipped a few aid stations, and I was waiting for it. You know, you pay for nutrition later in these events. You don't. If you miss an aid station, you'll pay for that in 20 minutes when your body runs out of that fuel. I got to about 10 miles, and the wheels absolutely fell off. I went over the hill at Palani Hill, started on the downhill, and the cramps started. And I started to feel sad. I was like, oh, I started feeling sick, I was throwing up. And I remember feeling sad at that point. People were like, well, you're in agony? I said, no, I actually felt sad. I'd missed my daughter's birthday. I'd been away from them for 10 weeks, the longest in my life. I'd not seen my children. I lived on a computer screen talking to them on Skype. And I started feeling sad that they'd given up so much, and it's going to come down to this moment, and my body's not cooperating. And at that point I said, no matter what happens, let's forget this title. You're doing it for them. You're going to honour them for the sacrifices they've made. And it was 4 miles of the most excruciating pain I've ever put my body through. And I don't even remember Craig and Andreas catching me because I was so in my zone. It was about a 20-minute period. I've been walking through the aid stations and I started running again. Rasmus Henning, a Danish guy, had caught me. I thought, okay, focus on his back, and I went, wow, the cramps are gone, and I realised I started feeling good. I'm like, you're back, baby. And I hit the gas burners, and once I came good, I ran through the energy lab, and it's an amazing feeling when you're so down, and then your body turns around. I was back, and I thought, you know what, we're on the chase. You know, I mightn't win this, but I'm going to honour the title that I had, and I'm going to get as close to the win as possible. And I ran the last 10 kilometres quicker than anyone that day, and I missed the title by 4 minutes. And Craig defended, and first thing I crossed the line and said, champ, congratulations, well done. And it was by far my greatest performance on this island. You know, the 2002 athlete that came here, that cocky kid, would never have gone, never endured what I did that day. He would have pulled out. What I went through, and emotionally, physically and spiritually that day was very, very proud of myself. I looked at that 4th place finish and said, man, you had a brilliant day to do what you did, and it gave me confidence.
But to the outside world, it appears as though Chris McCormack's World Championship days are over. Back-to-back titles have clearly established fellow Aussie Craig Alexander as the king of Kona. However, as has always been the case, Macca thrives on hearing the doubters write him off. He views his 2009 performance differently and immediately begins focusing on a strategy that will see him work in conjunction with some other contenders to conquer the reigning champ and regain the sport's holy grail.
You have to be prepared to be aggressive, you have to be prepared, and that's the thing with this race. Most people come here and 5th place is a career for people. But to win this race, you have to take a chance. And a lot of people come in and they get so caught up and tied up that they never take that chance. They don't have the courage to go, you know what, this is my shot at the title. And I said to the guys, we need to really push this bike ride. If we get off the bike with the runners, like years past, we're going to get trumped. Attack on the bike, especially the later sections when it gets really, really windy. I think that's when we can alienate the runners, and hopefully I can capitalise with a very, very strong run.
I was going to ask you what it takes to win here, and you've almost answered that question, but I get from you the sense that part of the battle is when you invest so much in something, when it actually comes to the moment to pull the trigger, it can be a very difficult thing to do. It's all or nothing.
Yeah, that's exactly, you've nailed it. Pulling the trigger is the difference between 1st and 10th. You've all got your guns aimed, but people are just too scared to go bang. And because of your own self-fear, your own inhibitions, your own what-ifs, you question your instincts, your racing instincts, because it's 8 hours. You don't know what the outcome's going to be. You make a decision, you commit, and your body doesn't respond, then it's game over. But you have to have the courage to do that, and the winners here, anyone who's won this race, has made a decision that has ultimately won them the race. You need to take a chance, you need to pull that trigger.
Yeah, better to fire your best shot than to leave with bullets in your gun.
There's nothing worse than regrets, and as a sports person, I think you learn to deal with failures much more than successes. It's a tough game in any sport. You fail a lot, and you can deal with failure if you know you have nothing left to give. You couldn't give any more. But when you start regretting what ifs, and you start asking those questions, they can haunt you for a career. And I think with this race, you don't want any regrets.
Ahead on Aussies Abroad, can Macca pull off his bold plan to shock the triathlon world? It will take the performance of his life to do so.
I said, this is it. This is your trigger. This is every track session you've done since you were a boy, every time you've hurt in your life, every night you've been away from the girls, every long flight, everything you've done in your life comes down to this moment. This is it. I just closed my eyes and went for it.
October 2010, Kailua Kona. Chris McCormack arrives on the Big Island with an audacious plan to topple fellow countryman Craig Alexander's bid for a hat-trick of wins. At 37 years of age and having blown up at Kona more times than he succeeded, Few expect Macca to be much of a factor as the race hits the open road on the all-important 180-kilometre bike leg across the hot and windy lava fields.
I said prior to the race that the opportunity is going to come in the winds up towards the bike turn. The group was very, very big this year, and I saw a group escape with some big riders, and I thought, this is great. I'm going to let the runners try and pull that back, take the sting out of the legs. And in bike racing, they say never attack into a headwind. But in triathlon, I say you always attack into a headwind, because unlike bike racing, triathletes are thinking about a run. So usually when the guys are hitting a headwind, they start thinking, oh, that's hurting my legs, it's going to hurt my run. So I waited for the faster runners to do their turn on the front, and as they rolled off, I hit the gas, and that was about 45 miles. I rode across to the group of bike riders and hit the front of that and said, boys, it's time to get out of here. We were able to grab about 8.5 minutes on Craig and the faster runners, and I drew so much confidence out of that, because out of everyone else in my group, I knew I was the quickest, and I had to deal with one guy, and that was Andreas. He's the heir apparent to the throne of this race. Him and his brother are incredible athletes, but I was going to play the inexperience card on him. I wanted him to fear my experience. So when I spoke to Andreas, I didn't shout at him, but I was like, Andreas, turn. You know, I spoke to him like I was I'm the owner of this race.
You're the alpha male.
Exactly. I put myself behind him, and I wanted to see his movements, see what he was doing, and as I said, I really spoke to him with authority. As we went through the aid stations, I'd actually move up on him and sort of muscle him out the way, that I'm going first for the drinks. And he really succumbed in that sense. He really gave me that respect, and I thought, oh, this is a good thing. Once I saw him start to weaken a bit, I hit the gas with the South African guy, Reynard Tissing, and they didn't respond. The German guys didn't respond. I got off the bike a minute 20 in front, so I ran quick the first 10 miles and tried to bait him into the game, and he bought the bait, and he came after me. And then I stretched it out to 1:40, and then I started hearing the times coming back, and you're starting to push, your body's starting to break down a little bit, and the mental anguish of hearing 1:40, the next mile 1:30, so he's starting to come, and that really plays on you. And heading up towards the energy lab, I just said to myself, you know what, he's going to catch you. Let's just relax, accept that he's going to catch you, take your foot off the pedal a little bit. Let's focus on the things you can control. We'll get the nutrition in, accept that he's going to catch you. When he does, be ready for it. You've had a break, and let's have a run with him, and at least I can see how he looks. I accepted that. I went into the lab and really took my time through the aid stations, tried to cool the body as much as possible, took as much fluid in as I could, got all my sugars in, went through the special needs, got my special drinks, came out of there, and I was expecting to be caught. And as I came out of the energy lab, they said to me 30 seconds. I thought, wow, I've only lost 30 seconds there. Maybe he's hurting a little bit more than I thought. And I thought, you know what, if I can keep him at 30, I'm going to bait him into chasing me, take the sting out of the legs, because I've just focused on my nutrition. This is going to take 10 to 15 minutes to come in, and hopefully when he catches me, I'll be on the upward wave, he'll be on the downward wave. I just slowly picked up the pace a little bit and tried to bait him, and I could hear all the German press out there going, come on, Andreas, you can get him. And I was like, this is great. He's going to chase, he's going to burn all his matches, and I'm going to outkick this guy. And he ran up to me with 3 miles to go. When he pulled up, I was expecting him to run past me, and I was just going to pick up the pace. But when he pulled up on me, he stopped. I thought, he's gone, he's tired. So I wanted to be the alpha male, so I didn't let him quite pull up on me. I thought, you know what, I'll pick up the pace now. I want to try and break this guy mentally, and I always stayed one step in front of him. We ran together for a bit, and I could tell he wasn't, I was feeling good, and I could tell he wasn't. I turned to him, I said, Andreas, regardless of the outcome here, best of luck, may the best person win. We shook hands, and he said, Macca, to you too. And boom, and then it was game on with 2 miles to go. Really started to pick it up a bit, and I gapped him. I went, wow, this could be good. And when I got about a 15-metre gap, I started to panic a little bit, and thought, I've still got, you know, a fair way to go here. Don't blow this with stupidity, don't get desperate. So I made him force to get back onto me. We crested the hill, and then the history of this race shows that whoever leads at Palani wins. It's almost downhill home, and we both crested together. I thought, this is a first. There's an aid station, it's exactly 1 mile to go from the finish line. And I heard him starting to breathe a little heavier, and he yelled, Coke, 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 water, sponges, Coke. I remember thinking, far out, this guy's going for aid. Thought to myself, if this guy goes for any fluid, I'm going. You have to put your hands to grab those cups, and he came to the aid station, he went for the Coke, and the minute those two hands went up, boom, straight down the outside. By the time he looked back, I had 15 metres, and I could tell how frustrating that would have been, because he just spent that whole hill catching up 15 metres, and now I've got it, taken it away from him like that. I said, this is it. This is your trigger. This is every track session you've done since you were a boy, every time you've hurt in your life, every night you've been away from the girls, every long flight, everything you've done in your life comes down to this moment. This is it. And I just closed my eyes and went for it. With about 1 kilometre to go, my body started breaking down. I was getting stitches and I couldn't breathe, and I started to panic, but I'm just pumping my arms. And you watch it on the TV now, you think you're sprinting, but you're like, it's so slow. But I gave it everything, and there was a guy on the camera. He's not supposed to talk to us at all. And I turned to him and said, mate, where is this guy? Because there was all the amateurs in the way. I was looking back, but I was scared I was going to trip over if I turned too far back. He said, you've broken the guy. I said, give me distance. I need distance. Tell me how far. He said, 200 metres, and I didn't believe him. And you turn right and then right onto Elise Drive. You have exactly a quarter mile, 400 metres to run from there. And when we went down that hill, I knew I could get a good look, and I went out wide and looked back, and he hadn't turned, and I knew I'd got it. I was like, you beauty. This time it was absolute sheer elation, just for my race, for my preparation, for the journey of the last 2 years. And people had written me off. This guy's old, he's too happy in life now, he's got his 2 kids, his wife's pregnant with their third, he doesn't want it anymore, he's hardly racing anymore, he's always home in Australia, he's travelling too much. And I'm thinking, man, like, I'm training my butt off. Running along there, I thought of my wife, and I thought of my girls, and I could not wait to see their faces at that finish line, because, you know, you talk every night about that moment, and you know, every day I'm away from them. That's why I'm away. I'm away for that day, for that moment, and yeah, that's what I was thinking. It was just, if you could bottle that up, that emotion, that feeling, you could sell that, you would be the richest man in the world, because it is incredible. Wish I was more articulate, I could describe it better. It's just chuffed.
Ahead on Aussies Abroad, now a 2-time World Ironman champion, Chris McCormack has just one piece of unfinished business. That Olympic dream that eluded him way back in 2000.
The Olympics was something that I promised my mother I'd do. It's a dream and I'm going to chase it.
Chris McCormack has spent his entire adult life chasing his dreams. The dream of becoming a triathlete. The dream of becoming short course world champion. The dream of winning the Hawaiian Ironman. Now there's only one dream left unfulfilled. His Olympic dream. And at 39 years of age, in the twilight of his career, he's circling back in time to chase down that dream as well.
What put the thought in your head in the first place?
Triathlon Australia put the thought in my head, believe it or not. They congratulated me after winning the World Championships, and then it came up in conversation. Well, what about the Olympics? Have you ever thought of going to London? At first I thought it was a joke. You know, how am I going to make London? It's a 4-year process. I've got 20 months to qualify.
He kind of just said to me one day, I'm thinking of going for the Olympics. And I was like, really? And we sort of sat down and spoke about it, and I was like, why not? Go for it. If you can, I think it'd be fantastic. And I think it sets a good example for the girls to, you know, follow your heart, you know, achieve what you want to, get out there, and it doesn't matter whether you come first, last, in the middle, you're doing what you want to do, like, not what everyone thinks you should be doing.
No one has ever come back in distance. It's never been done. I got told when I went this way, Ironman is a one-way ticket. You can never come back, and I accepted that, but I want to try and prove that theory wrong.
Ironman racing is 8 hours plus, 7 hours 50 if you're on a world record time and a great course, but normally 8 hours plus. Olympic distance racing, okay, is under 2 hours, normally about 145, 150. So a much different beast to deal with. Basically, we're throwing the diesel motor out and we're trying to put a turbo motor inside him.
The physiological challenge is enormous. You know, I'm an ageing body. You lose that zap, that speed. Kids are half my age, born in the 90s. Blows my mind when I'm racing them. And the intensity you're training at, you know, that high-end threshold intensity, your body breaks. And it's not as pliable as it was when I was in my 20s.
I was worried about injuries. I was really worried about injuries. So what's the biggest thing we've brought in? Rest. That's the hardest thing. You're constantly on his case about rest. He doesn't need miles no more. The miles are deep set into that body. What we need to do is work top end and quality top end rather than just keep turning over. What am I doing mainly now? It's making him supple, keeping on his case about getting his massages and treatments and so forth on the body. Never letting him get sore, constantly working it. Brought in Sportoga to him, which is a form of yoga. Trying to get him to remain supple. The biggest problem we all have with age, whether you're an elite athlete or whether you're just Joe average, is tightness of the body.
When I first made the switch in April of last year and I was racing some of these guys, I'm like, oh man, I've bitten off more than I can chew here.
The whole squad was young and they're running at much higher stresses than what Chris had been used to for a long period. They were toweling him up badly. He was quite embarrassed. He'd ring me sometimes, he'd be like, mate, I don't know if I've done the right thing here. He said, it's just not happening. I'm like, Chris, just be patient. You've learnt to be patient in your races, be patient with your training. It will come.
The level in the swim has improved astronomically. I think there's more, the pace up front is probably similar to the guys I was racing back in the day, but there was only 2 or 3 of them up the front then. Now, it seems the whole field swims like the best swimmers of my day. So the swim's been a difficult adaptation. I found the bike very, very easy, you know, with the drafting on the bike, the way it's come about, they've let the bike go. I think the bike riding nowadays is a lot softer than it was in the old days, so that adaptation's been very easy. And running wise, I'm a different style of runner than when I was young. I relied a lot on speed, and especially at the end of a race. Now I rely more on balance. I run my pace. I have the confidence that I can let a group go and run back onto them. I don't need to be in the action from the onset.
Very rare do you have world records set at the Olympics. Very rare do you have someone do an absolute brilliant race where it's just looked upon as one of the best races of all time. It's not very common that you see a world record. So we have a high theory that making the team is 3/4 of Chris's battle. The 1/4 left, anything can happen on race day. The Olympics have an amazing threat on the ego and the psyche of an athlete. Just those 5 rings completely change some athletes, and to other athletes it brings them up. What's the difference with Chris and the other athletes? Experience and headspace. He went on the national circuit last year with one goal in mind. Get them boys to know who he is, get up close to him, and just start to initially have no respect, but gain their respect. Now they've started to say, hang on, this guy's not a joke. He's starting to handle the speed. He's starting to migrate towards being a fast athlete again. We're not there yet, but he's migrating in the right direction.
Half the battle with sport is picking a path and having 100% faith in that path and not second guessing it. And you know, we did that, and I'm starting to see the fruits of that labour. So speed's been hard, it's been enjoyable, it's been different, and difference is good.
How will you define success on your Olympic journey?
I think defining success for me was, number one, is making the team, you know, and showing my girls. I've done all these things because I've always wanted to do them as a kid. I dreamed about going to Hawaii and winning it, and I chased it. And the Olympics was something that I promised my mother I'd do. I always wanted to do, and the opportunities presented it. And even at the top of my game, it's a dream, and I'm going to chase it. I just really want to instill that you can do anything and be anything if you believe and if you want it, and that'll be success for me. Give me a medal, wonderful, but for me, just if I can look at my kids and they understand that, I won.
Moving back to Australia and going in this path, are you now starting to think about what life might look like for Chris McCormack post-hardcore competition?
Oh, 100%, you know, and I think returning to these Olympic roots on that side has been very, very positive, because put myself in front of athletes that may not have known me. There's been job offers, and you know, you think, wow, it's quite humbling that you see opportunities for me there, and I want to stay involved in triathlon. It's been my life, and you know, a lot of people go, what are you going to do post-sport? I will stay where I'm at, in the sense that I won't leave triathlon, because it is my life, it's what I'm good at, it's what I know, I'm an expert at to some degree, and I hope I can give that experience, give that knowledge that I've learned over 2 decades to others.
What sort of athlete would you be best suited to coach?
I would enjoy coaching kids with dreams, just because I know that fear, I know that insecurities, and I'd love to be able to share that journey with them. Athletes that are driven, athletes that want to achieve. You know, I enjoy coaching most people, but I really am driven by that passion, by seeing that glint in their eyes.
I think he's a great ambassador for the sport, for young kids coming through, to show them, you know, believe in yourself and take the opportunity and go for it. You know, don't let people stand in your way, which he hasn't, and yeah, just go out there and do it.
Chase your dreams. You know, my mum used to say it to me as a boy, and I never quite understood it. And I remember those people that come to your school, you know, when you're 15 and you get that guy, you can be anything you want to be, and you'd be like, oh, here we go. You heard the message, but you never really grasped onto it because you couldn't relate. And now I feel like I am that guy, and I want to get that message across. And I say to anyone at home, go for it, believe, dream big, and go. Go for it. There'll be no regrets.